It's our pleasure to welcome now Robert Dozier, Executive Director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. Robert, always good to see you. Thanks
always
for coming
good
in.
To see you. Good morning.
Yeah, so I don't know that in years past, in all of our discussions here about this particular issue, that being pharmacy benefit managers, a.k.a. PBMs, that we've seen so much attention.
Well, we've recently seen attention in the last 2 weeks. We've seen very little attention all session long, but here in the last 2 weeks, since the House Bill 1123 came out of the Senate, off the Senate floor, now all of a sudden, the sky is falling and the scare tactics are coming in, and one thing after another. So that's the new attention that we're seeing.
Yeah. Well. What do you think? Is this thing going to get through? I've seen lots of arguments on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments on both sides. The House Bill 1123 was just sent to conference on the House floor just a while ago. Representative Hank Zuber sent the bill, or the House did as a whole, or what have you, to the conference committee. So now to go to a conference committee, our position was we did not want to go to a conference committee. We wanted the House to concur, send the bill to the governor, because the Senate passed the bill out of the Senate, basically with language that we were under the impression that the House was going to concur in. There was some negotiations with Ha Bryan and some others from the pharmacy side with the House, and we were under the impression that if the proposed language passed the Senate, it would go to the House and then concur. And then all of a sudden, like you're talking about, the sky starts falling, the fear tactics start coming in. There's always the one that always it never ceases to amaze me. This is going to raise costs. It's going to raise costs. It's going to raise costs. Well, they never tell you or show you how it's going to raise cost.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, the primary goal of this legislation is just to increase transparency in the process, right?
As the language was when it came out of the Senate, okay, it is to provide transparency and also some PBM reform. We were not setting our reimbursement or anything like that, changing our reimbursement methodology like you and I have talked about before with the NADAC methodology. The pharmacy community had already made concession on that. They took that out. That was one of our biggest part, if not our biggest part. So the other things were to tighten up loopholes in the current statute and to also expand on transparency and reform. And the PBMs have always done a great job of doing scare tactics with the employer groups and the businesses, not only in Mississippi, but across the country and on the national level. And they always use the scare tactic of this is going to drive cost up, this is going to increase premiums and everything else. People have to remember, the PBMs are the ones that set the premiums. The PBMs are the ones that set the copays. The PBMs are the ones that set the reimbursement back to the pharmacies. We're not setting our own reimbursement. So what we're saying is, hey, let's just put some sunlight out there and let's tighten up some of these loopholes and have some more reform and everything else. The people that I represent are independent pharmacists. Independent pharmacists are small business owners on one side, but they're also healthcare professionals on the other. These guys see what goes on across the state of Mississippi all the time. They're never going to agree to introduce legislation that would raise cost on their patients. That's not what this is about. But all of this chatter that we've had here in the past 2 weeks is nothing but scare tactics and fear-mongering.
Well, so what are the expectations in terms of the results that would be achieved here should this legislation become law, both for the independent pharmacists and patients?
Well, for the independent pharmacists, it'd be kind of a more of a playing field, a level playing field. Now, is it going to be perfect? Is it going to help them with their bottom line? No, because I just told you a while ago, we took out the biggest part, our biggest ask, the NADAC part. That would have changed our reimbursement methodology, kind of like the Division of Medicaid did back in 2017, and it saved the state of Mississippi $55 million annually. All right, so it's going to, like I said, do transparency and reform. Now, the end goal right here is to help the patient. The patients in this state right now are being steered by the PBMs and the insurance companies to basically preferred pharmacies that are out there. Well, these preferred pharmacies are affiliate pharmacies that are owned by the PBMs, the PBM mail orders, the PBM retail pharmacies, and such like that. So we live in a rural state. Some of these patients might have to drive, 30 miles one way to this pharmacy that they're being forced to. We don't think the patient needs to be forced to go to that pharmacy. Let the patient choose. And so those are some of the things, the steering aspect that we were trying to tighten up, and one thing after another. Also, on the appeals process, we're trying to tighten that up a little bit. That language, the appeals language, has been on the books for probably about 4 or 5 years already, and so has the steering language. It's been on the books for 4 or 5 years right now.
So one of the provisions, as I understand it, Robert, is that the PBMs would have to charge insurers the same amount, right, that they pay the pharmacists. Is that correct? So they're in the middle, right, of the insurers, the big insurers and the pharmacies.
I think you're talking about the PBM would have to pay the pharmacy, the independent pharmacy, the same as they would their affiliate pharmacy.
I see.
That means like, let's take CVS Caremark for an example.
Okay.
CVS Caremark is a PBM, but they are also in the retail pharmacy, and they also own a specialty pharmacy and mail order pharmacy.
Okay.
And so Caremark, being the PBM, when they reimburse the independent pharmacy, if they reimburse them $10, well, it has to be the same as their independent their affiliate pharmacy. So if they reimburse their mail order company or their affiliate pharmacy, the brick and mortar, $10, they got to do the same as the independent.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's been on the books. That's been on the books for quite a while too.
Okay. Well, is the problem, when just thinking through that scenario, is the problem here that the PBMs who are reimbursing the independent pharmacies are also competitors?
That's correct.
To some extent.
And here, let me just break it down real easy. It's kind of like McDonald's telling Burger King how much to charge for the Whopper. Okay, you have your competitor out there who is dictating the terms back to you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Board of Pharmacy here in the state, they did an audit on Optum RX, and I think it's a pretty thorough audit from what I've heard. I haven't seen the audit or anything like that, but the Board of Pharmacy, they released like a 2-page executive summary. And in that executive summary, the board states that Optum was reimbursing their affiliate pharmacies, their own pharmacies, way more than they were the independent pharmacies and some chain drugstores.
I got you.
Now, that's kind of turned into a legal issue between the Board of Pharmacy and Optum RX. They're kind of in court with that right there. But, that 2-page executive summary was, I think it's still on the Board of Pharmacy website, and you can go and pull it up and look at it. And if you see that 2-page executive summary, that's about all I know and all I can tell you. But the board did state that they have seen cases where Optum is paying their affiliate pharmacy way more than they're paying the independent pharmacies.
Okay, gotcha. So where do you think this legislation is headed at this point?
I don't know. We had some conversations yesterday, and at the end of the day, of all of the proposed changes, our association could not agree to any of the proposed changes, and so our message was to concur with the Senate amendments and send the bill to Governor Tate Reeves. But now the bill is going to conference committee. So right now, I don't know what it's going to look like.
Well, if you want to hang around and keep talking about this, I'm still curious about how this transparency requirement is going to work that's included in the legislation as well.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, we got Robert Dozier. He is the executive director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. We're in the Element Well studio, coming right back. Here's the text for you, Robert. This is Taylor Jones. Me and my wife, Fair Pender Jones, own an independent pharmacy in Grenada, Mississippi. She could explain everything the politicians won't say. It's all about big money, PBMs, and lobbyists getting paid millions. And I hear you, Taylor. I do, and I appreciate your conundrum and concern. I'll just say this: I don't have a problem with anybody pursuing profit. I mean, I don't have a problem with lobbyists getting paid for lobbying. I mean, that's legal in our country, and it should be. It's free market.
You and I have had this conversation multiple times before, on the air and off the air, about the free market in healthcare. There is no free market
and I'm with
in
you
healthcare.
On that. I'm with you.
And so when you've got a pharmacy benefit manager or a insurance company throwing the contract down in front of a independent pharmacy, and saying, "Hey, take it or leave it. This is it." There's no negotiating, none whatsoever. What are we looking at with the two big chains right now, Walgreens and Rite Aid? Rite Aid just came out of bankruptcy court. Why is Rite Aid having problems? Because they are not affiliated with a PBM.
No doubt.
Look at Walgreens. Walgreens is a 100-year-old company. They just sold to a private equity firm. Why is that?
And closing a bunch of stores.
Closing a lot of stores, thousands. Why is that? They are not associated or affiliated with a PBM.
Yeah.
Just like the independents. The Board of Pharmacy, they've got a site or something on their website that shows the number of pharmacies that have closed over the past 4 years. It's about, on average, it's a little more than 20 pharmacies across the state that are closing. Now, listen to this. Not only is an independent pharmacy or a pharmacy in general closing, that is a healthcare facility that our state dearly needs, but we're also losing a business in this deal right
and the
here.
Employees and associated with it, and vendors that serve those companies as well.
Look, I've been a free market. I've been a capitalist guy my entire life. I think that is the great thing about the country we live in. But at the end of the day, there is no free market in the healthcare system. I don't care if you're on the hospital side, the physician, the nurses, dental, pharmacy, or what. Yeah,
and to your point, I rarely talk to anybody, no matter what their role is and position is in the industry, that's happy with it, with our system.
Yeah.
And what makes it, I think, particularly complicated, to your point about there being no free market in healthcare, is that you're not being paid for the most part by the end user. You're being paid by a third party.
That's correct.
And when you got a third party involved, that just massively complicates things.
Yeah, how do you go from a two-party system to a three-party system and save money? You don't. You're going to incur costs somewhere, and somebody's going to get shorted. It's like I've always said, the PBM sits in the middle.
Yeah.
The business community, their premiums and costs are steadily going up year after year. That's a proven fact.
No doubt.
The patient and / beneficiary, their costs are always going up. That's proven. The pharmacy's reimbursement is always going down. That's proven. Well, what's the common denominator there? The PBM, the insurance company, because they're the ones that set all of the premiums, the copays, and the reimbursements and everything. They're in control. The PBM market only benefits the PBM market.
Yeah. And I think there's some truth to that. And to Taylor, your point about lobbyists, Robert and I see each other in the Capitol quite a bit.
That's right.
And it is full of lobbyists. I mean, but they serve an important role in the lawmaking process. I mean, how much time do you spend just educating lawmakers about these issues?
That's true. That's true. A lot. And it's a very complicated issue. Look, we can sit here and say good things about lobbyists. We can sit here and say bad things about lobbyists, like we can radio hosts.
Yeah, sure. Might as well join in. But, they are, generally speaking, they're highly compensated because they're they have a lot of influence, and so I'm not going to deny or discount that. But I think it's a little unfair to characterize lobbyists as just bad people because they get paid to sit between people who want certain policy and people who make them.
We can sit here and talk about lawyers being bad.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to say that whenever you need one.
Exactly right. So they serve a valuable role in the process, and in general, it can be a job that comes with a fairly high level of compensation because it's difficult work, and it requires someone with unique skill set and talents to do that. You hear this all the time down there at the Capitol. Yeah, I really like those particular lobbyists, or I don't like those particular lobbyists. And likability, like it or not, no pun intended, does figure in quite a bit to the way they vote on certain issues. There's no doubt.
That goes to the old saying, it's a lot easier to attract flies with honey than it is vinegar.
Right. So, okay, well, it looks like maybe you've got some traction going here. What do your members think about this bill?
Well,
I'm hearing that they feel like it stops short, Robert, of what you need.
You're talking about my independent pharmacists?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because the big thing that we had to give up on the front end at the beginning of the session was the NADAC part.
Okay.
That's the reimbursement methodology that the Division of Medicaid went to, and it saves $55 million annually, and those are the Medicaid numbers. They're not Robert Dozier's numbers.
Yeah, I got you.
So anyway, yes, it does kind of fall a little short right here because we had to give up our big ask.
Okay.
And now we're looking at reform and transparency and such like that. And now that we're getting the traction, or we had the traction, and we're going to it came out of the Senate, we liked the bill and everything, we were under the impression the House was going to concur, and then all of a sudden today we hear that the House has sent the bill to conference. And we're a little disappointed on that. Our message was we wanted to concur with the Senate amendments and hopefully send the bill to Governor Reeves.
Yeah, gotcha. So let's talk about this transparency requirement. How would that work in practice?
Well, transparency, and I don't know exactly which one you're exactly talking about, but transparency in general has
rebates. Talk about that.
Okay, so in that aspect right there, the PBMs, they collect rebates back from the drug manufacturers. Okay, the drug manufacturers have to pay these rebates to the PBMs to get on these formularies and such like this. And it's kind of a pay-to-play deal. Well, for years, the PBMs they did not want to disclose these rebates and everything else like that. Well, there's language in the bill that says that the PBM has to disclose 100% of the rebates back to the employers. Okay. That's all great and everything, but there's some issue with that it's only talking about the aggregate. Okay, and you're very smart numbers man. When you're talking about the aggregate, you're not talking about the real number. You got to get down to the real number right here.
Yeah,
and there is information that just came out recently from the West Virginia Commissioner of Insurance. West Virginia went a step further and said, hey, you need to pass on the rebate, not disclose it, but pass on the rebate to basically the end user, the patient. And guess what? Over years, it has shown that those premiums have gone down.
Okay.
So that is one example of transparency or PBM reform being able to work to lower premiums and costs to the end user, the patient. And that goes against what the PBMs have always been saying. Any type of transparency or any type of PBM reform is going to raise cost. And that is the furthest thing from the truth.
Gotcha. On the C-Spire text line, rebate equal kickback. That's not necessarily true. There are a bunch of industries that utilize rebates as incentives to their partners, their business partners.
What I say a rebate is, or a refund is, it's an overpayment. You're paying too much on the front end, and you might get that money on the back end.
Yeah.
But that other entity, they have used your money for a certain period of time.
Agreed.
And basically put it in an interest-bearing account. And if you really want to get to the truth about the high cost of prescription drugs, you've got to get to a transparent cost number. And at this point in time, NADAC is the best benchmark that's out there. And so it's cost, and it's a transparent number. And like I said, that was our big ask this year in this bill, and we had to take it out. So, we're kind of like, well, where do we go from here in conference?
Well, transparency in healthcare, from a pricing perspective, is a huge problem, not just with pharmaceuticals.
No, 100%. And you get a hospital bill out there, and you start looking at cost on your hospital bill just for a one-night stay, and you can't figure it out.
Yeah, you can't. No. Nor can you figure out who do you owe what and how much you owe.
100%.
Which is something that needs to be addressed in healthcare in general. But I get what the texter's saying here, that in this case, it does kind of appear to be sort of an after-the-fact remuneration that should have been handled on the front end.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Robert Dozier, Executive Director of the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association, has been our guest. Always good to see you. Thanks for coming in,
always
Robert.
good to see you, my friend.
Appreciate
Look forward to it again.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio.